It's been said that without understanding the occult, one cannot understand the Third Reich. The tide of Nazi ideology that swept Germany into radical racist violence is hard to define in a strictly political sense. The unwavering belief of Nazis in their ideology often displays a semi-spiritual and religious nature. It's for this reason that many people have taken to adding imaginary narratives to an already misunderstood subject. Along with the dismissal of the more absurd claims about Nazi occult roots, many have also cast aside the true account of Aryanism, the religious dogma that was prevalent during the Third Reich. However, it's impossible to deny the allure of magic, occultism, and border science on the Nazi Party and the German people. Dr. Nicholas Goodrick-Clarke, in his seminal volume, The Occult Roots of Nazism, stated that the Nazi leaders were, quote, obsessed by semi-religious beliefs about an Aryan race of God-men, the needful extermination of inferiors, and a wonderful millennial vision of German world domination, end quote. He argues further that this was not unique to the period in which the Nazis were in power from 1933 to 1945, and in fact, Austrian-German esoteric trends could be traced back to the 19th century. At this time, the Habsburg Empire had ruled from Austria since the 13th century, but in their waning power were beset by ethnic conflicts and racial division. Vienna, the capital city, became a hub for immigrants from around the empire, and by the year 1900 was populated by only 43% local Austrians. Amidst these tensions was the Industrial Revolution, which reshaped traditional roles and encouraged many village communities to seek employment in larger cities. As the cities were often more racially mixed, the German culture was not as central as nationalists preferred. In addition, as Jews were forbidden in many cases from purchasing and owning land, they were represented in great numbers in the cities, which would later fuel racist ideas of their supposed seizure of economic and societal control from ethnic Germans and Austrians. Alongside this were cultural changes, as the traditional values were offset by new social norms with increasing modernization. As a result, some of the German-speaking population of the Habsburg Empire began to put forth sentiments that would later reappear in final form during the years of the Third Reich. The German-speaking Austrians, off-put by the migration of foreigners, desired to unite all the German-speaking principalities together into one political state, a view held by many pan-Germanists over all German-speaking areas of Europe. Meanwhile, their ever-changing reality and unpredictable futures sent them into the past for answers that addressed their concerns about racial purity. The nostalgia for traditional ways of life and the disgust at urbanization built resentment as Europe continued to modernize into the 20th century. Ariosophy, the Gnostic racial philosophy that fueled the later Third Reich, emerged from this environment. Ariosophy, which in more religious terminology is referred to as Aryanism, centered on the German Volk, or people. This term called to mind more than just ethnic commonality, but also the collective memory, culture, and spiritual heritage of Germans, which distinguished them from other races in the far-right thinking of the period. Thus, Aryanism was a belief that combined German Volkisch nationalism and racism with esoteric thinking. These together heralded a restoration of Aryan rule and a coming utopia under German world domination. The Aryans were first known to the Europeans in the 18th century from the translation of the Rig Veda, an Indian religious text dated to 1500 BC. The Sanskrit language of this text was shown to bear resemblance to European languages, and from there on, a discussion arose among anthropologists as to the connection between ancient people groups who had ruled in the Far East and modern Europeans. Along with linguistic considerations, anthropology began to provide empirical data which they suggested was evidence of inequality between various races. Compared to the blonde hair, blue eyes, and tall stature of the Aryans, non-Aryan races supposedly had different circumferences of the skull, gaps between their eyes, and other strange measurements to classify them in the Aryan hierarchy. To the Aryanists, the Aryan was a partially divine superhuman of the highest caste in their racial pyramid. They thought the ancient Aryan race was preserved purely in the German people, as well as somewhat in other northern European areas like Scandinavia. They were rulers of a historic massive empire and were responsible for all the technological advancements and societal developments in history. This clearly racist and elitist reading of the Rig Veda was not based on fact, but instead filled in with the desired answers to the questions that Germans had at the time, an error which the frustrated nationalists were eager to make as their world changed with the coming of the 20th century. They believed in a surprisingly consistent, if imaginary, mythology, which told of a prehistoric golden age facilitated by the Aryan race, who was led by a Gnostic priesthood. These priest-kings espoused ideas of racial superiority and built their society around Aryanist doctrine. However, this paradisal civilization was thwarted at some point by a conspiracy of non-Aryan races, principally the Jews, who sought to bring in egalitarianism. As a result of this conspiracy, the Aryanists complained that all of history's war, economic hardship, and political strife was rooted in the defeat of German world power. The relics of this civilization died out, and its hidden knowledge became a focus of secret societies where occultic practice was used as a means of retrieving the secrets through psychics and German witchcraft. Initially, these beliefs were maintained only by small groups of people as the 1890s progressed. Yet the hold on the German people would only grow worse with time, as the first Aryanists were already active in Vienna before the start of the First World War, and would persist there even to Hitler's residence in the city. The Treaty of Versailles ended World War I in the year 1919, and propelled the attitude of Aryanists into even greater bitterness. Germany saw its land, colonial territories, military, and most importantly its pride taken away. Considering the shame brought on Germany by the loss of World War I, one can notice the wistful longing for their imagined mythical past gain momentum, along with a feverish desire to take revenge. Dr. Konrad Adenauer would later write, quote, "National Socialism could not have come to power in Germany if it had not found in broad strata of the population soil prepared for the sowing of its poison," end quote. During the interwar period, these sentiments were propelled to their zenith as Germans lived under what they considered extreme and unfair conditions. Their defeat and the treaty they were forced to sign was seen as the final straw for Germans who sympathized with Aryanist beliefs. Though not a political or material reality, Aryan folklore and myths propelled the German nation further into fascism by giving Germans a filter through which they could understand themselves in the turmoil of the interwar period. This helps to explain the vehement and violent loyalty of Germans to Nazi ideology throughout their reign. During the years of the Weimar Republic, the resurgence of Theosophy, the blending of Eastern and Western esoteric traditions, set the stage for a widespread Aryan spirituality which would be held by many senior Nazi and SS officials. As early as the 1920s, the newly formed Nazi Party and its predecessor in the German Workers' Party drew immensely from medieval and ancient German occultism. Occult societies like the Thule Society developed strong anti-Semitic attitudes. They practiced secret rituals and initiation ceremonies, and developed paramilitary groups from the World War I veterans in order to fight communism in Germany. The heroes of the German past, like Parzival, the Teutonic Knights, and Arminianists, were praised for their expansion of Aryan interests. Disenchanted by the modern world, these Germans were also drawn to the Gnostic ideas found in Kabbalism and Freemasonry, which were woven into the Völkisch ideology. In their minds, these quasi-religious sects legitimized their beliefs by revealing hidden knowledge and pointed to the improper order of the society in which they lived. Perhaps the most prominent example of occultism in the Nazi Party is the influence on its leadership. Nazi leaders, including Hermann Göring and Rudolf Hess, were involved in the Thule Society and brought their ideas into the formation of Nazi ideology in the early days of the party. Other important figures sponsored the research of German esoteric thinkers and sought out insane Aryan spiritualists. Though less curious about the occult himself, Hitler was possessed by the desire to reconstitute Germany according to Aryanist ideas. He is known to have read books which espoused the same occultic thoughts as his colleagues. This included a book called Magic, History, Theory, and Practice, in which Hitler personally underlined the following sentences. Quote, "Horror always lurks at the bottom of the magical world, and everything holy is always mixed with horror," end quote. As well as, quote, "False images are necessary for the recognition of truth," end quote. Thus, Aryanism replaced the previously Catholic Germany with a distinctly German religion which tainted wedding ceremonies, childbirth, and holidays with Nazi doctrines. Though the influence of the occult is debated over the course of Hitler's life, the visions of Aryanism were executed most faithfully by one of his most powerful lieutenants. Heinrich Himmler was the leader or Reichsführer of the Schutzstaffel, or SS, the primary perpetrators of the Holocaust. Himmler was brought up in a traditional German home in rural Germany. His ideas about race and culture as an adult seemed to tie his nostalgia for his German roots with sinister notions of blood and soil, a Völkisch doctrine that would reconcile genocide with rationality. His position in the early Nazi Party was a strange post for a man of his inferior stature, and he would prove himself an oddity, a coward, and a passionate and tyrannical Aryanist. The formation of the SS, of which Himmler was set in command, was a unique example of German aspirations to call from their medieval past an imagined image of Aryan grandeur. The Teutonic Order was a medieval guild of crusading German knights who cruelly pursued warfare against pagans in the Baltics and in the Holy Land. Ironically, these pagan killers became the inspiration for the Schutzstaffel, along with pre-Christian warrior cults of ancient Germania. Himmler's cruel design for the SS came to resemble these influences by deliberate actions, and each step of their descent into hideous violence was justified by Aryanist promises of a future utopia. Though the Teutonic Knights were Catholic crusaders, the pre-Christian German tribes worshipped a god called Wotan and were assumed by Himmler to be in much closer relation to the ancient Aryan religion than was Catholicism. As a result, Himmler implemented a ban on the celebrations of Christmas and Easter in the Catholic Church, and instead celebrated Yule and the winter and spring solstices. He reinstituted pagan festivals and began the conversion of Hitler's SS bodyguards into a pack of Aryanist zealots who took on their own rituals and sacred sites. Himmler sponsored searches for ancient occultic artifacts and legends like the Holy Grail, Atlantis, and even Thor's hammer. This originated from the belief in miracle technologies left over from the long-lost original Aryan civilization. As well as other Nazi elites, Himmler hired pendulum dowsers as primary military strategists and employed personal astrologers for consultations on his warfare tactics. They used ancient theosophic symbols, which included the main Nazi swastika, a charm of good fortune in Eastern religions, and the double Sieg rune, which was the primary insignia of the SS. Himmler also sponsored research into ancient Germanic devil worship and witchcraft, as well as fields such as cosmobiology and world ice theory, which suggested that moons made of ice collided with Earth in prehistoric times. He sent a group of SS explorers to remote parts of Asia and Tibet in search of long-lost Aryan civilizations, and also established within the SS a department called the Ahnenerbe, which researched racial theories and Volkish doctrines. The sinister nature of Aryanism was made apparent in the murder of millions of Europeans, primarily Jews, especially in SS-designed death camps. Apart from other non-Aryans, Jews were considered to be especially parasitic and incompatible with the vision of Germany heralded by Aryanism. It was this rationale that made possible the horrors of Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Dachau. When the war ended, the Allies were left with a troubling discovery when liberating the camps. For the first time, the rumors were dispelled, and the true nature of Aryanist ideology was seen by the outside. 6 million Jews were dead, and yet many in the defeated German populace still held the belief of this deranged doctrine. It was at this point that the Allies began a commission to denazify Germany and eventually turned these responsibilities over to the reformed German government. 30,000 Aryanist books were banned and destroyed after the war, and the Allies educated the German public on the atrocities committed in their midst. Posters were hung with pictures of the concentration camps in town squares, with the intention of placing the blame of the Holocaust not just on the SS or Nazi leaders, but on the German people. Though Aryanism was largely defeated by the political downfall of the Third Reich, it has been continually espoused by deranged individuals in various parts of the world. As with post-war Germany, education on the Third Reich has made possible a reversal of the evil policies that once dominated their country. Ignorance of this history is dangerous, and for this reason it is important to look back, remember, and learn from humanity's past mistakes.